What I want to talk to you about today is conceptually kind of value as a technology stack, where money may not necessarily be real or tangible in the sense it once kind of was. My background is I guess we're going to start the afternoon with people with no credentials. I'm a college dropout. I built my first company and started discovering something called interchange fees, which essentially eat up about 3% of every exchange, which accounts for about $40 billion in the US economy annually. What I started realizing was that fee pissed me off more than I could possibly describe. I spent the last 4 years of my life trying to figure out how the technology stack behind money works, and how we can actually start solving problems and making transactions not only essentially free, but more secure. So on one side, our company created a payment network that allows people and merchants to exchange money without paying traditional interchange fees. And on the other side, we accelerated or created an architecture which allows banks to essentially move money in real time without the risk they currently do. That exchange accounts for $30 trillion in the US economy annually. So there are not many bigger markets. We're going through a huge shift right now where symbols play a lot in how we perceive value. So these are archetypes. When applied to numbers, carry value. So those numbers are really just the number of zeros that you find inside of a computer at the end of the day that you work so hard for. These numbers are meaningless without the symbols attached next to them. So there we have, obviously, value. That value is what we spend so much time working our asses off to earn. And it's my feeling that all that value, even if we might work to get like a free pair of shoes or a set of speakers when we were a kid, as adults we spend half of our lives basically going out and working like crazy to get value. That value given to us in dollars essentially goes into a bank, which is now a database. Banks have become databases. Databases are tables of data. So if you think about it, all that money, which is essentially now an accounting entry which you earn, is held in tables inside of databases. And that time, in my opinion, is something that should remain valuable. And inside of the current infrastructure, it's not. So every time you exchange money on a plastic card, can I just see a show of hands? How many people have a plastic card on them, credit or debit? So every time you exchange money with that card, it becomes less valuable. It gets siphoned off into the nether realm to never be seen again, to go to God knows who. And I don't necessarily think that's right. If you're going to trade half your life to earn value, then you should be able to exchange it without that value being worth less. So again, in the kind of like construct of you work, some guy makes a call or sends off an email, allows you to get paid. It tells a bank that they can basically talk to the bank's database. That bank's database can then allow that accounting entry to go to another database where it ends up in another table. And for that right, the money is now less valuable. It's less complicated technically to move money than it is to send a photo over MMS. But I guarantee you have no simple, easy way inside of any piece of electronics to easily access the money inside of your bank account and exchange it with somebody else, effortlessly, safely, and in real time. So that's what Dwolla is building, the ability to do that and really harnessing what is now real, that money has become data, and that value that we earned is defined by archetypes, and that won't change. But even physical money is essentially a physical personification of a value that was inside of a digital field. So it was an accounting entry that they allowed you to take this physical asset to replace a virtual asset, which it started with. So even physical money begins in the kind of virtual world. So I think that the convergence of kind of the concept of we're mapping the planet virtually, there's kind of like this in meat space, right? But all of our phones know we're here. We're all nodes on a network. This network is essentially static and dynamic depending on where we are, what we're doing, what we're carrying. And when we start looking at the exchange and creating new efficiencies there, and we start also looking at the concept of how can we start looking at that network from the perspective of tying it into our average and daily lives. Now, just because we are here, there are a whole bunch of people whose phones know they're here. There's a whole bunch of networks around you that essentially are starting to say, look, this is not complicated. It's latitude, longitude, elevation. It's a series of digits on a grid that defines who you are and what you're around. And those digits, or those nodes, are becoming routable. They're tied to something. They're tied to you. They're tied to me. They might even be tied to your bank account. And the opportunity to take this series of nodes on the grid and route it to a bank account is one of the hugest shifts we'll probably ever see in our lifetime as it relates to the movement of money, because we are disintermediating all the expensive hardware and software needed inside of the exchange that currently exists. No more swiping, no more tapping, where essentially plastic cards become code, and we're already there, we're just still triggering the transaction with the code. So these digits, routable to accounts, are going to give us the ability to essentially tie together anything without existing hardware or without expensive hardware. And being in Des Moines, it's really interesting because whether you know it or not, Des Moines is one of the most advanced ecosystems for essentially accelerating payments anywhere in the world based on this thought. And I know that because Dwolla has already done it and we're already doing it. So the underlying architecture that moves the money when connected to this kind of virtual realm can solve huge problems as it relates to fraud and costs inside of the economy. I don't think anybody would ever argue that putting a few $1 billion back into the economy and putting that into work or keeping it in your communities would be such a bad thing. So the way we kind of look at the world is on two sides. We're going to remove the hardware infrastructure that's required to recognize the presence of people and other things. So the things connected to the internet should all be allowed to engage in a transaction. And then we're going to fix the other side, and we're going to create new efficiencies inside of the marketplace that set money free. And inside of an open architecture where anything can connect to it, where these nodes are real things and real people. And again, this already exists in Des Moines. This is not a philosophical what if. This has become reality, it just is not widely distributed yet, which is my job. And hopefully I don't fail at that. Thanks. I appreciate that. So, transactions in the future are really about the expression of what we need into an endpoint. It's about me saying, I want coffee. I want to send $4.62 for my soy latte to hit an endpoint when I hit a send button. And for that, I should be able to acquire what I want. It should go to my bank account, and all this stuff should just sort of happen for me. And I think that expressions expressed digitally is going to define a lot about how we interact with payments in the future. But it's important that we, one, have the ability to recognize what we want to pay on one side, and that the money can actually settle. And how those converge in the middle is definitely a question. I think that start recognizing what is around you is also very important. And these are not pipe dreams. These are actual endpoints for Dwolla's API. The ability to recognize everybody in the room and make a payment to any internet-connected device. We think that's really powerful. We think that sets things free. And things like looking at transaction histories to do anything from create preemptive, I hate the word deals. Deals have no value for me. I don't care about 30% off on that coffee. I get it every day regardless. I just want it faster. So if something inside of the system baked in can look at my transaction history and say, get Ben his coffee faster, you have no idea how happy I would be just to get that latte without having to hit a button. So this framework is something that seems unbelievably obvious, but inside of the marketplace for the past 40 years, we've done nothing but build on top of the existing infrastructures. And in doing so, even though we believe we're engaging in instant transactions, we have essentially real-time guaranteed payments of funds, but the money doesn't clear on like instantly. It settles on top of a bank-to-bank network, which again, moves about $33 trillion a year, but the payments aren't good for 90 days, which means in the US economy, there is always more than $4 trillion exposed at any given point in time. Does that not seem like a slightly irrational oversight to anyone else? It's an architecture problem, and it's simply the way we're moving money that's exposing us in a way that doesn't need to be the way we do it in the future. So if we think about it, really money just goes from one bank account to another bank account. And there's this interconnected series of oh my God that happens in the middle. And a lot of the people that take some of that money basically are taking it as they implement basically technical debt, which makes the system less efficient, and also other things that, quite frankly, you don't care about because you're never going to see that person. You swipe your card and 300 different people behind the scenes get paid. Again, that seems weird. Where do you think most of that money goes? It doesn't stay in your community. It definitely goes somewhere else, and I still haven't figured out where it goes exactly. So if we think about it, the infrastructure itself is also responsible for a lot of the problems that we have around it. Things like identity fraud. So how many people have had their identity stolen? I use this one a lot because it's so much fun. So the people who didn't raise your hands, your identity's already been stolen. Somebody just hasn't chosen to use your information to steal your money yet. So that's a data problem, right? And our data stack, or our value stack, or the way we process payments is largely to blame for that. The fact that it takes two numbers and the ability to create a file to unload your whole bank account without your permission is screwed up. I think we can do better. And so we look at it not only from a security perspective and how we can probably better help people, but how we can give money back to the communities. So if we can create a new efficiency that gives 40 of that $48 billion worth of interchange fees back to small merchants, that's really powerful. I mean, if you start looking at local restaurants from the perspective of, let's say I go buy pizza, 20 bucks sounds like a fair price, right? So in order to serve me that pizza, that person needs to get an SBA loan. They need to get in a fight with their wife for 5 years to open their first restaurant. They need to have high school kids taught to wash dishes. They need electricity. They need POS systems. They need all of these things. To put their whole life on the line to give me a $20 pizza, they get the luxury of taking home 3.5% on that sale. Their whole life for 3.5% on a $20 pizza. Same thing on coffee, man. Super high risk, super low margin businesses. Made more high risk by the fact that the transactions themselves are so worthless because of the way we process the money. So if, again, I can give that guy back 3%, guy or gal, 3% back on that transaction, then again, I think that's meaningful. So what happens when that 3% is essentially compounding externally? So outside of the United States, it gets even worse. We think 3% is bad. Internationally, there are countries where it's 30%. If I could say to you that changing the way that you get paid gives you 30% more income, and I can hand you the solution to do it free of charge, does that have value? I think it does, and that's one of the reasons I'm choosing to spend the next probably 5, 10 years of my life doing that. Dwolla has created a technology that allows you to connect bank accounts. And then we believe that that technology should be open. It should be something that you should be able to distribute to networks. And networks could be anything. You know, your phone is like this kind of obvious example. It's connected to the internet, right? But everything is connected to the internet. Any device or any person connected to the internet should be able to exchange value. So when we take that architecture, we create those new efficiencies and we protect people in a better way, that should be available to anyone and everyone that can write a line of code, and even the people who can't. So if we take that and we put it into that open architecture and we say it doesn't matter if it's a phone, it's a car, it doesn't matter if it's a website, an e-commerce store, the biggest or the smallest one, it doesn't matter if it's a chip. If you can connect to a secondary Zigbee network, you should be able to pass an authorization. Even furthermore, I think when you start looking at things like coffee, it's always the obvious example, but we can do so much better, and we will. We start looking at things like pacemakers. Pacemakers are already connected. We start thinking about the next evolution of internet-connected devices and how they biologically interact with us and the ability to kick off a string and make or acquire anything. There is a huge shift happening beneath our feet, and it's all basically the world's being networked. And it's all being done wirelessly. You don't have to plug into a wall anymore. You just need a little bit of battery power. And so we want to be in the middle of that. We believe that connecting this virtual world that lays on top of kind of meat space with the ability to settle money represents a huge opportunity to not only move trillions of dollars inside of the United States, but hundreds of trillions of dollars globally, and in a way that is more efficient, that allows people to keep more of the value that they earn. So it is not an argument. The way we move money in the technology stack will evolve. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I do know that the evolution of that stack has the capability to open up a lot of money back into communities and retain value inside of exchanges, which is really what technology should do for us. It should allow us to do things more efficiently, more safely, and it should open up billions of new dollars and billions of new dollars worth of markets. And Dwolla wants to be in the middle of that, and that's exactly what we've built. Thank you for your time today, guys. I really appreciate it.